Section 12. 54.
Considering the modern-day obsession with knowledge and so-called decent occupations, the original meaning of education and occupation should tell us something. Originally, the word education comes from two Latin terms, ec and ducere. Ec means out, and ducere means to draw. Therefore, true education means to draw out knowledge from within. This is quite different from the established practice today of stuffing in knowledge. As somebody pointed out sarcastically, the world is full of educated derelicts. And what does occupation mean? Literally, it implies something that occupies you. However, finding the appropriate occupation to suit a person's temperament is not an easy task. Oftentimes we see that somebody who could have been a musician is a doctor, and somebody who could have been a good doctor is a businessman. The importance of identifying the right job for the right person can only be gauged when you see the agony of such square pegs in round holes. Only an Albert Einstein could have the wisdom to reject an offer to become president of Israel, because he argued that he did not have enough experience in working with human beings. Therefore, it would be appropriate if the right knowledge came to the right individual with the active participation of the teacher at an early age. In addition, in determining one's occupation, one should above all focus on innate potential and interest. The situation clearly calls for a process-oriented education instead of an input-oriented one.
(55)
Logically, we should learn about things before doing them, and that is presumably why the pundits enforce this in our educational system. But it is not the natural way, nor, I venture to think, the best way. The adolescent wants to do things first, and only then does he appreciate the problems involved and want to learn more about them. They do these things better in primitive life, for there at puberty, the boy joins his father in making canoes, patching huts, going out fishing or hunting, and preparing weapons of war. He is serving his apprenticeship in the actual accomplishments of life. It is not surprising that anthropologists find that the adolescents of primitive communities do not suffer from the same neurotic difficulties as those of civilized life. This is not, as some assume, because they are permitted more sexual freedom, but because they are given more natural outlets for their native interests and powers, and are allowed to grow up freely into a full life of responsibility in the community. In the last century, this was recognized in the apprenticeship system, which allowed the boy to go out with a master carpenter, thatcher, or plowman to engage in the actual work of carpentry, roof mending, or plowing, and so to learn his trade. It was the same in medicine, in which a budding young doctor of 16 learned his job by going round with the general practitioner and helping with the bloodletting and other treatments. In our agricultural colleges at the present time, young men have to do a year's work on a farm before their theoretical training at college. The great advantage of this system is that it lets the apprentice see the practical problems before he sets to work learning how to solve them, and he can therefore take a more intelligent interest in his theoretical work.
(56)
How you feel about yourself as a person is called self-esteem. People with high self-esteem believe they are capable, strong, and worthy of a good life, while those with low self-esteem feel inadequate and worthless. Low self-esteem often develops in childhood and continues throughout adulthood, causing severe emotional pain. Therefore, it is important to develop a healthy, positive sense of self from an early age. Many people base their self-esteem on external factors, such as how much money they earn, how much they weigh, and whether others like and appreciate them. If one of these external factors changes, their self-esteem can be greatly shaken. For example, if your self-esteem is based on the fact that someone else loves you, then you risk feeling vulnerable and worthless if that person's love ends. By the same token, building self-esteem is not an easy task if you have been hurt by others or have suffered years of personal, academic, or professional failure. To build up your self-esteem, you need to take an honest look at your strengths and weaknesses. Being at peace with yourself, with who you are, and what you have to offer others is a major part of having high self-esteem. This inner peace does not mean that you are ignorant of your weaknesses. Rather, it means that you accept who you are and genuinely like the person you have become.
'57.
An important aspect of language systems is that they are open. That is, a language is not a finite set of messages from which the speaker must choose. Instead, any speaker can use the resources of the language, its vocabulary and grammatical patterns, to make up new messages, sentences that no one has ever said before. Because a language is an open system, it can always be used to talk about new things. Bees have a remarkable system of communication, using a sort of dance in the air, in which the patterns of a bee's flight tell other members of the hive about food sources. However, all bees can communicate about is a nectar supply, its direction, distance, and abundance. As a consequence, a bee would make a very dull conversationalist, at least in human terms. Another aspect of the communicative function of language is that it can be displaced. That is, we can talk about things not present, about rain when the weather is dry, about taxes even when they are not being collected, and about a yeti even if no such creature exists. The characteristic of displacement means that human beings can abstract, can lie, and can talk about talk itself. It allows us to use language as a vehicle of memory and of imagination. A bee communicates with other bees about a nectar source only when it has just found such a source. Bees do not celebrate the delights of nectar by dancing for sheer pleasure. Human beings use language for many purposes, quite unconnected with their immediate environment.
'58.
It's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words. Of course, the great wastage is in the verbs and adjectives, but there are hundreds of nouns that can be got rid of as well. It isn't only the synonyms, there are also the antonyms. After all, what justification is there for a word which is simply the opposite of some other word? A word contains its opposite in itself. Take good, for instance. If you have a word like good, what need is there for a word like bad? Ungood will do just as well. Better, because it's an exact opposite, which the other is not. Or again, if you want a stronger version of good, what sense is there in having a whole string of vague, useless words like excellent and splendid and all the rest of them? Plus good covers the meaning, or double plus good if you want something stronger still. Of course, we use those forms already, but in the final version of Newspeak, there'll be nothing else. In the end, the whole notion of goodness and badness will be covered by only 6 words. In reality, only 1 word. Don't you see the beauty of that, Winston? It was BB's idea originally, of course. He added as an afterthought.